Our window on America this morning opens on Detroit, Michigan, where mourning those lost to the violent city streets has become a tragically familiar occurrence. But in an effort to stem that violence, one woman turned her anguish into action. CBS correspondent Terry Phillips joins us from Southfield, Michigan, to tell us more about this crusader and others who've chosen to give their grief a voice. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Jane. You know, we're all vulnerable to the shock of violent personal tragedy, but there are those, for instance, right here in Detroit, who can rise above their own pain to help others. Unfortunately, the cycle of violence hasn't been broken. The tragic death of young people is still an all too common story, and it happened again at the beginning of this school year.
Kim Rudolph was walking home just a few blocks away from school when a stray bullet took her life and left her friends and family to grieve. 10 years ago, gunfire also took the life of 16-year-old Derek Barfield. But rather than merely mourning Derek's death, his mother, Clementine Barfield, turned her loss into a kind of crusade. She founded So Sad, Save Our Sons and Daughters.
If people are getting killed every day and adults don't take a stand and say, this killing has got to stop, this killing is wrong, then naturally they're going to think the killing is just a part of life and is the appropriate thing to do.
Barfield's grassroots group fights street violence through marches, vigils, and rallies. While reaching out to those who've already lost family members, for Barfield, So Sad was a way to fulfill her son's own dreams.
My son often talked about being a minister. I always say that this is his ministry. I don't think that this is exactly what I would be doing with my time at this stage in my life.
Anyone that kills a child should never be let back into society again for whatever reason.
John Walsh knows Barfield's grief and her sense of mission. The 1981 kidnap and murder of his young son, Adam, turned Walsh into one of the country's best-known citizen crime fighters, as host of the television program America's Most Wanted.
My life and the lives of many others changed forever.
Today, Carolyn McCarthy is running for Congress, but politics was far from McCarthy's mind until 1993. That's when her husband was killed and her son wounded in the infamous Long Island Railroad massacre.
But I couldn't put on his tie, and that's where his father should have been.
For most people, the violent loss of a loved one is devastating. Yet some of these survivors have been able to transform their misfortunes into positive action.
The significance of the loss isn't necessarily better served by being bitter and withdrawn. It is sometimes better served by an advocacy role, by moving on with life, by sharing with others the pain and the ways of mastering the pain that you've experienced.
I had wanted them to know that they were not alone in their sorrow, that it was important for us to make sure that these people didn't die in vain.
Tragedy propelled Victoria Cummock into the world of advocacy as well, when a terrorist's bomb brought down Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. Her husband, John, was one of the victims.
If Pan Am 103 brought me to my knees and my children to my knees, and then we stayed there, and it ruined our lives, then the terrorists would have won 4 more Cummocks.
That nightmare drove Cummock to become one of the most outspoken champions for airline safety. She's still trying to make sense of it all, for herself and for others.
Only the names of the airline passengers and their families have changed.
I can close my eyes, and the next thing I know, I'm in the Everglades with those families.
Grief has changed the lives of all these survivors turned advocates. What they share is their determination.
The choice is to give up or go on. I chose to go on.
Now, one thing we should point out, of course, is that for every Clementine Barfield and for every Victoria Cummock, there are thousands, perhaps even millions, who have overcome their personal tragedies in much less public ways. For them, it's heroic merely to go on. Jane.
So, Terry, what sort of effect have these advocates had?
Well, Clementine Barfield has certainly had a very positive effect here in Detroit. In the last 9 years that So Sad has existed, police statistics and FBI statistics show that the crime rate has dropped here. And as far as Victoria Cummock is concerned, She's still working to improve the safety of airline travel. Her work on the White House Commission has tried to make that a better thing to do as well.
They're certainly inspirational women. Thank you, Terry Phillips in Detroit. It's 23 past the hour. Still ahead, protect your credit cards and your money.